Hi, it's Bobbie from Bobbie's Baking Blog, and I thought it would be fun to do something springy. And I love the way this blue calming frill cake looks. So I'm going to show you how I designed the frill cake, and then it's got matching pansies on top because pansies are the flowers that come out first in spring and generally stay around through the end of summer. This is my way of welcoming spring before it comes. Alright, so we have our cake, and I'll explain that in a minute. But I'm going to tell you how we get that ombre color for the ruffle. So I start with 175 grams of ice blue fondant mixed with 25% gum paste, but for a total of 175 grams of this ice blue, as dark as I choose my darkest color to be. So as dark as you want it to go, make 175 grams of that. And then another 175 grams of white fondant mixed with 25% gum paste. So you have a 3-to-1 ratio of fondant to gum paste. And you're going to gradually add in your white color to lighten up each of your blues so that by the end you are almost to a white color. So that's your lightest blue going all the way to your darkest. So that's how we made that. And then wrap it up and store it for making your cakes. For this particular cake, I just did a basic gift wrap cake for a round mini cake, same as you would do for a large mini cake, because you're not going to see this and I'm not too worried about it. So for the project, you need to have your cake made and covered with fondant. You need some water, a brush, a cell pin to frill. We're going to cut our strips with an FMM ribbon cutter, and then we just need a mini spatula for cutting while it's on the cake, and you'll see what I'm talking about, and a spatula for transporting. And then of course you will need a foam pad, and you want one that has a soft side and one that has a hard side, and you're going to use the harder side for this. So we're going to start by turning, I think I already, yeah, this is the top, turning our cake upside down. So if you're working with a big cake, obviously you wouldn't grab it like that. You'd grab it like this and you would turn. You're going to turn your cake upside down because you want your lightest on the top, and you're going to be covering it, the connection, with the darker color. And you'll see what I'm talking about as I go. Let me move this pad out of the way. I'm going to take my ribbon cutter, and you want to cut so that you can have an equal strip. If you're working with a bigger cake, you would have to measure, but since I'm working with a small mini cake, it's fairly simple for me to get the exact same size. And I know a lot of people will say you don't need the exact same size. You probably don't. It looks better if you do. I think it comes out looking a little bit more even if the strips all look the same than if you just start willy-nilly cutting. And if you don't have a ribbon cutter, you can just use a ruler and cut your fondant gum paste so that it's all the same size. Alright, so this is way too big, but that's alright. And I have a seam in the back of my cake because I did a gift wrap cake, and normally I would have taken my time and gift wrapped this a little bit neater and smoother, but because I'm going to be covering it, there was no reason to. So you always will have a seam when you're doing a gift wrap cake, so I want to end and start at my seam each and every time. I'm going to put this around just so I can kind of get an idea of where I'm going to be without stretching it out. I'm going to give myself a little bit extra just in case. I'm just using my little mini cutter to cut away the excess. I'm going to move the cake out of the way. I'm going to transport that to my foam pad on the harder side. I'm going to take the back side of my felt pin. So normally you would frill with your point, but we're going to frill, and this is a medium felt pin. And you just want to, let me even this up a little bit because I don't want my frills to look frayed. So just take your finger. Sometimes those ribbon cutters, as they get older, start losing a little bit of their sharpness. And I find it's easier for me to frill on the side towards me. And you just want to bring your sewing pin over and frill it. Just pushing hard against your pad. And it's up to you how frilled you want it to be. If you want it to be just slightly frilled or or have bigger, wider frills. And that's pretty nice. That's how I like it. So I'm going to bring this in, bring my cake back. And I find for this purpose, I like to wet the actual strip rather than wet my cake. That way I know that if I'm slipping, I'm not going to get the cake part too wet. You don't want to use too much water, just enough that the entire thing will go around. And then lift up on the side that you cut. Make sure that your frill is facing upward so that it's frilling up the cake, and come around evenly on your cake. Now, I do not have a tiny little cake stand or little teeny cakes, but since I can pretty much see, I can either turn my little cup around or I can kind of turn my cake in the beginning to make sure it's all even. And you should come out right about the same spot. And then just take your offset spatula and cut at that seam gently. You don't want to tear, you just want to kind of he doesn't want to cut. There we go. Cut him away. I need to have just a tad more water, so I will do that. Bring it in and close up your seam. Make sure everything is nice and snug down here. Turn it around. Nice and snug. Perfect. And then we're going to go to the next lightest color. And I don't know if I told you, I was working with Sugar Flares Ice Blue to get that real pretty calming blue color. And again, you're going to take your strip and just cut a strip away. Now in this particular color, I'm going to do 2. This is the only one I'll be doing 2 on. I could have done 6 ombre colors, but I chose to not to do that. I like the way it looked having one color going down twice. And you can put that anywhere you want. And if you look at the different cakes that I made, they're each in different spots. So whichever blue that you like best, or however you want it to look. So I pretty much know from before how much I'm going to need. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that excess away. I'm going to bring it back up on my pad. It still is a little bit longer, but that's alright. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our sewing pin. As you can see, I am pressing fairly hard, and that is why I want to work against the hard side of my foam pad. And there's several foam pads out there that have a hard and soft side. If you work on the soft side, you're not going to be happy with the result of your frill. You need that little bit of extra tension going around. And don't worry if you rip. It actually gives it didn't rip, but don't worry if you do rip. It actually gives a nice little contrast to the frills. And like I said, however you want it to be frilled. On some of them I frilled more, on some I frilled less. Same exact thing. I'm going to take my water. Now you could mark your cake exactly how you want these to lay, but it's pretty easy to eyeball it. You don't really need to do that. So I'm going to go back and find my seam. I cut this side, so I'm going to go around on over here. And what I want is I don't want to come up too high. I don't want to be laying on the frill above it, because if you do that, you will find that it'll begin to slip. If it doesn't make contact, if your strip does not make contact, no matter what size your cake is, to the cake, you'll find as you get towards the bottom from the heavy weight, it will begin to fall down. And then I will sometimes go in with a brush and open it up a little bit. You're going to do more of that when you're all finished, but sometimes I like to do it as I go. So now we're going to go with our same color again. And again, I'm going to cut a strip. Like I said, sometimes when you use these ribbon cutters, they get a little frayed. So I'm going to just take that off. And again, too long. So I'll just take some off right there. I'll put it back on my pad. And I just realized I'm showing you the fold incorrectly. It'll work this way. It works a lot better. We're going to kind of flip this. We want this to be upside down so those frills stay open and going downward. So I should have started the other way, but we can fix it. It's no big deal. So that was why I turned it upside down. But then I didn't use it upside down. However, we were early enough on in that it's not going to make a difference. My fondant is a little bit on the tough side, so I'm going to press it a little bit harder than I was before. That's probably because I pre-cut these strips so that you wouldn't have to hear the pasta machine. I do have it under a Stay Fresh mat. And the reason I mix it with just a little bit of gum paste is because you need those frills to really stay open for you. And if you don't, sometimes your fondant will start to drag or sag a little bit, and that wouldn't look okay. Alright, so now that we have the right side going on, we're going to do the exact same thing. A very little amount of water. You can always add more water, but if you add too much water, you're going to end up with a mushy mess. So I want you to make sure you can see what I'm doing here. And then the side that I went ahead and cut is the side that I'm going to start with. Of course, you want your frill to be pointing down. And now you can see what I'm talking about. You want to make sure that you come down low enough that you won't see the cake when you go to open up your frills, but you do not want to be laying on your strip. I don't have enough water on there, so I'm going to just add a little bit more. There we go. It should just, as you twist around and holding it lightly, you don't want to stretch out your fondant. It should just make contact, and then you can go back and smooth it in. you want to keep it as straight as possible so that you come out even when you come back to where you were, to your seam. And if you're working on a cake that you enrobed and didn't use a paneling method, which is what gift boxing a cake is, just make a seam on one side. If there's a side of your cake that you think isn't as pretty as one side, make that your back side. If your cake is gorgeous on all sides, just pick a side. Alright, so we have that on. And so we're going to go to our next color. Which is a little bit darker. And as you can see, the theme here is that we're going darker as we go. I'm just going to push that down. Sometimes the little fondant wants to follow you. Alright, so we have a nice strip. Wrap up what you aren't using. Again, I'm going to look and see if there's a side here that doesn't look as good as the other. And actually, I don't like this side as much, so I'm going to go ahead and take this side off. And then we're going to frill. And you can do this with any color you want. You can do it orange, pink, purple. If you fall in love with a color that you've made, keep a small piece of it, and that way it'll be easier to, I'm not going to say duplicate it, because you can never totally duplicate a color. That's why I'm telling you to make your colors enough for the size cake and as many cakes as you're making. Because getting the dye lot the same, just like with when you're sewing fabric, you can never do that. But at least you can get close. If you end up loving one, or you've made it for a client and they saw a cake that you did and they absolutely loved that particular color and you want to mimic it, if you keep a little piece of your darkest color, you'll have a better chance of doing that. So we're going to come back in right on our seam. We're going to bring it around again. At this point, we don't want to touch our cake anymore. We'll hurt the rest of the frills. And if you have just the right amount of water, it will make contact. If you find you need to add more water, go ahead and do that. I'm just going to gently take my finger around, make sure that it is all connected. Take my mini spatula and cut right where that seam is. Alright, so now I have two more colors left. So I have my strips rolled out to a number 5 thickness on the pasta machine. And I went ahead, since you saw me cutting it with the ribbon cutter, and pre-cut them. There's no need for you to see all that repetition. I'm going to go ahead and put it on. Again, the firmer side of my pad. And I know Orchard Pads has a firm side. So does PME. You can find them just about anywhere. You just want one, when you go look at it, one side's a little bit softer and one side has a little bit more tension. So I went ahead and frilled that as I did before. I'll bring my little cake back in. If you were working with a bigger cake, of course you would be on a cake stand that turned, and your strips would be longer and wider. And there's so many variations of this particular style that you can do. I'll be showing that in another video. Alright, so you want your frills pointing downward, and you're going to put it around, going evenly. Turn if you need to. And sometimes as you get towards the end here, you want to make sure, like I said, don't want your strip to be on the previous strip in front of it, because the weight will start pulling it down and it won't look right. You'll be disappointed with all the work that you just did. And again, go to your seam and cut. And this way, all your pieces will come together in the exact same spot. So even if you design something that goes like my pansies go all the way around the cake, so there isn't a back to the cake as such as the flowers go, there is a seam here, and you can decorate that with anything you want to make it look like it is almost like a fabric type dress, and finish it off that way. But you will have a seam. There's another way of doing this, and like I said, there's so many variations where you don't come together like that. But it's more where you're going up and down, and I do plan to show that on a bigger cake at another time. And again, I am just taking the back of the cell pin, which it's important to remember to take the back. If you take your pointy side, you're going to end up with little teeny like flowering type of like almost a Dresden-y look, and you don't want that. You're going to work on the opposite side that you would normally work on a cell pin. And if you don't have a cell pin, you just want something of this diameter, that would give you the exact same thing. You probably could even use a ball tool. We're just going to take this last one almost to the bottom, well actually to the bottom of the cake, and bringing it around. And the idea is that you don't see how your frills are connected. It looks like they're just marrying into one another. Alright, so now that we have that, the tricky part comes in, and the bigger the cake, the trickier this gets. But it's fairly easy to do. You kind of want to move your cake, and actually, I think the bigger the cake is, the easier it's to do, because you have a little bit more room. You're not working with a lip of a carton. And just turn it over without smushing your frills. And then take a soft brush and go around. I like to start at the top because those have been on there the longest, so they're going to be drier. So I like to get those open first. And I can bring in my seam so you can't see it. So you want to open up each and every layer, because the whole idea of this is that it's very open and loose. And I have to say, I'm just falling in love with this blue color. It's so calming, which is unusual for me because I'm not even a blue person. I normally don't care for the color blue. But I have found recently, with the brilliant colors of Sugar Flare and the different hues of blue that I'm working with, I actually like blue. So we're going to open this up. So, and you just want to work your way down. If you see that you're not as open as you want, you want to do it with a soft brush. You don't want to rip your frills. And like I said, if it tears a little bit, it's not a big deal. Because the design of the cake, it'll add a little bit of character. Obviously, if you are ripping everywhere, that's going to add too much character. You don't want be ripped everywhere. If you, when you frill, get a little tear, you don't have to redo it. And the softer the brush, the easier and less likely it will be to damage anything. And remember, each layer isn't supposed to look exactly the same. You might have put pressure in a different place when you were frilling one color than you did on the other color, and that's fine. Now, I generally will let this sit a couple hours before I put my flowers on there. And you can pretty much do whatever type of design you want. And then once it is dry enough, I will go and take a artist brush and a little bit of silver for this color and just paint on the edge. So that's it. That's how you frill a cake.